It's great to see everybody. I see a lot of old friends, and so it's wonderful to have everybody here. And so we're excited to present this information to you today. So today's speakers are going to be Nikush Carlo, who is our IARPC Plan Development Director, and John Pierce, who's the Associate Director for Ecosystems Research at USGS, and Kai Bricks, who's the Arctic Program Director at NOAA Fishers, and me. I'm Larry Hinsman, the Executive Director of IARPC and the Assistant Director for Polar Science in the Office of Science and Technology Policy in White House. We're going to tell you a little bit about IARPC, overview of the draft plan with a specific focus today on the foundational activities. We will talk about how to submit the comments towards the end and provide opportunity for you to ask any questions that you want. Yeah, so with that, I think we'll go on. So next slide, please. So IARPC is the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. By bringing together leaders from 16 agencies and departments and offices across the US federal government, we enhance the research on issues in the Arctic. And so these are the agencies that are actively engaged in conducting research. And by working together, we can enhance the collaborations, foster the partnerships, and really leverage a lot of the assets and the resources and the expertise that these agencies have. So IARPC was created in 1984 under the Arctic Research and Policy Act. The act called for a comprehensive national policy focused on the needs of research and the objectives for the Arctic, for Arctic research. It established IARPC and our sibling organization, the Arctic Research Commission, to help implement the act. Next slide, please. IARPC brings together the federal agencies to coordinate Arctic research and reduce duplication of efforts. IARPC is organized into several levels of staff and participants. The top level is our principals. This includes the one policy level member from the 14 federal agencies responsible for the investment and research in the Arctic, as well as representatives from the White House, Office of Science Technology Policy, and the Office of Management and Budget. The IARPC principals meet annually to provide policy advice and direction, and they also develop the 5-year Arctic research plan and sometimes direct the agency staff and the IARPC Secretariat to address issues. Next slide, please. So every 5 years, IARPC creates a new 5-year research plan. The plan is created in consultation with the US Arctic Research Commission, the government of the state of Alaska, the residents of the Arctic, the private sector, and public interest groups. The plan identifies critical areas where the US Arctic research supports US policy, from community to global scales, and looks for areas where federal investment can be enhanced through interagency collaboration. The plan aims to advance knowledge and decision support for the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. It is implemented in part through the IARPC Collaborations website. The Arctic Research Plan focuses on research that will be enhanced through cooperation through the federal agencies, and these plans do not attempt to address all Arctic research. So this is a slide from the current Arctic Research Plan, which was released in December of 2016 and focused on the fiscal years 2017 to 2021. And you can see there were 9 goals in this current existing Arctic Research Plan. And we have in this current plan, the plan that's under development now, we have reduced that to 4 goals, which Nikush will talk about shortly, or 4 priority areas. Next slide, please. So the current and future Arctic research plans incorporate the principles for conducting research in the Arctic. Researchers working in the Arctic have a responsibility to respect local and indigenous cultures and knowledge and advance stewardship of the Arctic environment. The core principles are to be accountable, to establish effective communication, to respect indigenous knowledge and cultures, to build and sustain relationships, and to pursue responsible environmental stewardship. Next slide, please. So this is our timeline. So we are currently in the second public review phase of the plan development, which is the second column from the right. This phase will last until the public comment period closes on June 11th. A federal steering group organized the initial public scoping comment period that began in April of last year, 2020, and closed with a community workshop in September of 2020. Starting in November of last year, federal drafting teams began working with that information to create the draft plan. And we could not have done it without the input from the Arctic research community. So thank you very much. Thank you to all those authors. Looking ahead, after the public comment period closes on June 11th, IARPC will review and consider all the input received and revise the plan as necessary. We are aiming to reduce the final plan by the end of 2021. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Nikush now.
Thanks, Larry. Hi, everyone. I am Nikush Carlo, and I'm the IARPC Plan Development Director. So I'm going to talk about what is in the plan itself that is available now for review. So this illustration shows the three main components within the Arctic Research Plan: the policy drivers, the priority areas, and foundational activities. The plan structure and approach is quite different from previous plans. One thing to really take away from that is that the priority areas and the foundational activities are highly interconnected and matrixed, and I'm going to talk about each of them. The foundational activities relate to and support and inform the priority areas. They're processes. They help guide the federal government's approach to Arctic research and focus on improving research and collaboration within the specific focus areas or priority areas. And these are intended, the foundational activities are intended to last sort of longer than the 5-year time frame of individual plans. The priority areas are cross-cutting and seek to identify areas that need additional attention or research. And these are things that came through as we were listening to comments that came in from you and others, a workshop, and all the outreach that we did last year in 2020. Both the priority areas and the foundational activities will require and really benefit from the input from the existing IARPC teams, and those are represented at the very center of this graphic. You can see the iceberg, which is our logo for the collaborations web platform, and that is intended to represent the collaboration teams and the current collaboration teams and their role in contributing to all of these different things. Next slide, please. So let's start with the policy drivers. These policy drivers might look familiar to you if you are familiar with the current plan. These are the same policy drivers. And really, over the past 50 years, the national interests and objectives of the U.S. in the U.S. Arctic have remained very stable. So these are a really good foundation for us that are, grounded in history, but also applicable to current national efforts. So policy drivers are well-being, focused on enhancing the wellness of Arctic residents, with emphasis on themes of cultural vibrancy, economic development, mental and physical health, stewardship, advancing responsible management of the Arctic environment, with an emphasis on globally driven change, security, strengthening national and regional safety, as well as risk management and emergency preparedness. Arctic global systems, improving understanding of the Arctic as a component of the planet Earth. Next slide. The plan identifies 4 priority areas, and each of those priority areas identifies a broad cross-cutting goal, which is intended to bring together a lot of different elements and align sort of research investments to achieve progress in those areas. This priority area format is a shift from previous plans. So we're taking a targeted approach that will, we hope, allow and enable IARPC to help address the really pressing needs, research needs that require a collaborative approach. Priority areas are designed to respond to research challenges identified by Arctic communities, federal agencies with a presence in Alaska, federal agencies with Arctic investments, the state of Alaska, and other non-federal partners. And as a reminder, The plan is not intended to cover the full breadth of what the federal government is doing with regard to Arctic research, but really focus in on areas where federal agencies can collaborate with each other and also build partnerships to increase the value of that federal investment in the Arctic. So I'm going to quickly review the main goals for each of the priority areas, and then welcome John and Kaya to talk more specifically about the foundational activities, which is the focus of this webinar. Next slide. The goal of priority area 1, community resilience and health, is to improve community resilience and well-being by strengthening research and tools to help us better understand the social, natural, and built systems in the Arctic. Next slide. The goal of priority area 2, Arctic system interactions, is to enhance our ability to observe, understand, predict, and project the Arctic's dynamic and interconnected systems and their linkages to the Earth system as a whole. Next slide. The goal of priority area 3, sustainable economies and livelihoods, is to monitor, maintain, and proactively adapt the Arctic's natural, social, and built systems to promote sustainable economies and livelihoods. Next slide. The goal of priority area 4, risk management and hazard mitigation, is to secure and improve quality of life through an understanding of disaster risk exposure, sensitivity to hazard, and adaptive capacity. So now I will hand the floor over to John and Kaya to tell us a little bit more about the foundational activities.
All right, thanks, Nikush. Hi, everyone. My name is John Pierce. I'm with the U.S. Geological Survey Alaska Science Center, and I'm just going to present on a few of the first slides here on foundational activities, and then hand it over to Kaya Bricks to talk about the remaining slides in this section. So as Nikush mentioned already, the foundational activities are a new addition to the Arctic Research Plan. We have not had those in past Arctic Research Plans, but they've been added to this one through the plan development process that Larry mentioned earlier. And we really feel like these are important because they're activities that will support a robust federal research plan and program. And they'll also really help the many priority areas that Nikush just covered. These sort of activities will be mainly supported by the existing IARPC collaboration teams, but we are open to developing new communities of practice for these activities as we identify those going forward. So next slide. So as was in the graphic that Nikush showed a minute ago, there are 5 foundational activities in this Arctic Research Plan. And these are expected, the foundational activities are expected to continue into the future, likely beyond the lifespan of this current the plan that we're working on now. And these 5 activities are co-production of knowledge and Indigenous-led research, data management, education, monitoring, observing, modeling, and prediction, and also technology innovation and application. And so what I want to do now is just go through each one of these and briefly talk about sort of why we consider these foundational and what IARPC will strive for through this Arctic Research Plan. And then I'd encourage everyone to read the current draft of the Arctic Research Plan to learn more about these foundational activities. So next slide, please. So the first one is co-production of knowledge and Indigenous-led research. And through development of this plan, we really feel that given the many perspectives and knowledge held by Indigenous peoples about the Arctic, that federally funded research and decision-making should really build upon and expand opportunities for co-production of knowledge and Indigenous-led research. And that's why this foundational activity is here in this current plan. Plus, activities initiated by and with Arctic residents and Indigenous knowledge holders are more likely to effectively address local priorities in their solutions. So on this slide here, it shows what IARPC will strive to do in the next Arctic Research Plan with this foundational activity. And that's enable communication and coordination, sustain engagement and build trust, continue to put the principles for conducting research in the Arctic into practice. And Larry had an earlier slide on those principles. And also increase capacity within Arctic communities for Indigenous-led research. Next slide. The second one is data management, and this is really critical to research and monitoring and to Northern community infrastructure and economies, especially in a time of rapid environmental change. And so through this foundational activity, IARPC is going to strive to use collaboration teams that we have currently to develop a culture around thoughtful data management, to share best practices, innovative ideas, and networking opportunities, and to proactively connect federal agencies, local partners, researchers, Indigenous knowledge holders, and others around this theme of data management. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kaya to present on the remaining foundational activities in the list here.
Thank you, John. My name is Kaya Brooks, and I'm with NOAA Fisheries in Alaska. And I'm going to cover the remaining 3 foundational activities: education, monitoring, observing, and modeling and prediction, and technology, innovation, and application. So to start with, on slide, the next slide on education. Education in the foundational activity is considered to be education in a classic sense, as well as outreach education to those in Alaska and beyond, recognizing that learning occurs through varied knowledge systems, not simply the traditional scientific disciplines that we might consider when we think of Arctic research. Research and outreach are about learning and gaining new skills, not only for up and coming participants in the research community or the workforce, but also those currently engaged in learning new knowledge. Changing Arctic also requires new skills and understanding. The Arctic Research Plan strives for in education to increase the engagement of rural and Indigenous students in STEM education, to generate an academic workforce development opportunities of varied sorts, enhance coordination among federal participants as well as the academic community and beyond, and to expand education and outreach to the public and decision makers. And lastly, IARPC is looking to create new and expanded ways to deliver Arctic STEM content. Next slide, please. Monitoring, observing, modeling, and prediction allow us to increase understanding of the Arctic as a system and the degree and direction of past and future changes. We generate actionable data, forecasts, and new research directions within this foundational activity. And in this activity, IARPC strives to identify gaps in observational and modeling capabilities, promote international coordination and cooperation, and increase coordination with other federal efforts. Next slide, please. The final activity in the foundational activities is technology, innovation, and application, seeking modernization of infrastructure to improve accuracies, increases in autonomous data collection, and accelerated information delivery. IARPC within this foundational activity is striving to identify technological solutions that can accelerate progress, to convene agencies and partnerships to design solutions, also to determine common technology needs, and lastly, to provide improved technology services as identified by Arctic communities. That completes our foundational activities overview, and I will turn it back to Larry.
Thanks, Kaya and John. Next slide, please. Okay, so the plan we've described provides a high-level implementation guidance to IARPC and the measurements of success by which IARPC will hold itself accountable. But this is a broad-level strategic plan. This plan will be implemented by development through the application of a biennial implementation plan. Well, 2 of them actually, biennial implementation plans, which will aim to align the federal resources and leverage partnerships with non-federal entities. As with its predecessor, the current plan, this plan will be implemented by 4 new priority collaboration teams that are open to all interested parties. And these teams will direct and coordinate the activities to reach the plan goals and ensure coordination and collaboration of resources to address pressing needs. Each of the collaboration teams coordinate closely with the priority area teams and will continue to be vital communities of practice. They will continue to the objectives of the priority area collaboration teams and may pursue interest in issues outside of the plan. The Arctic research plans do not cover all the research being done by the agencies and IARPC's interest, and activities extend beyond simply implementing the ARP. Collaboration teams will be instrumental in implementing the Arctic research plan and pursuing other lines of inquiry and action. Next slide, please. So this is an illustration. I hope you can see the little gray lines that are between the columns. So look closely there. So this is an illustration of how the federal agencies and departments, which are shown on the left, may contribute to each of the priority areas, which are in the center. And I want to highlight for you that on the right are the collaboration teams, the existing collaboration teams with the anticipated contributions to the priorities, which are shown by the connecting lines. You will notice that there are significant contributions from each of the collaboration teams to each of the priority areas. We hope that you can see and develop connections to the priority areas. It's important. This is an opportunity to think broadly and across disciplines to figure out and determine where to contribute and how to best use the expertise and the capabilities that we have and align those to address the most urgent research needs. So next slide, please. So we are accepting comments on the draft plan through June 11th this year. And we're specifically looking for comments on the priority area goals, the justifications and potential partners, and on the foundational activities and on the implementation and metrics. We appreciate and welcome all of your thoughts on the plan draft. So next slide, please. So there are several ways to comment. You can submit your comments through the Federal Register notice on the Federal Register website, which was distributed, so many of you have seen that. You may email your comments to iarpcplan@nsf.gov. You could leave a voicemail at the number on the screen there, which is, for those of you on the phone, it's 703-783-1658, or toll free at 888-657-7759. Note these calls are limited to 5 minutes, but you can call back multiple times to make sure you get your comments heard. Or you can also send hard copy comments to Roberto Delgado at the Office of Polar Programs, National Science Foundation at 2415 Eisenhower Avenue in Alexandria, Virginia, 22314. And if anybody missed that information who's on the phone, just shoot us a note and we'll provide this information. Or we'll send you our newsletter so it contains all this information. Next slide, please. So after the comment period closes, the federal agency staff will review and consider the input and revise the plan as necessary, as appropriate. By law, the revisions have to be done specifically by federal agency employees. We will make all the comments submitted through the mechanisms in the Federal Register notice and responses publicly available with attribution on the IARPC Collaboration's website. The questions and comments made in this meeting will not be part of the public record. Only comments submitted through the mechanisms outlined in the Federal Register notice can be formally included in the public record. Our goal is to have the final plan released later this year. Next slide, please. So for questions, you can find more information about the plan development at tinyurl.com/arcticplan. The plan is downloadable at tinyurl.com, Arctic Plan Download. And these links all go to the IARPC Collaboration's website. If you have specific questions, please contact the Plan Development Director, Nikush Carlo, or the Indigenous Engagement Specialist, Danielle Stickman, and the IARPC Secretariat at plan@iarpccollaborations.org. So next slide, please. So this webinar is one in a series of informal informational sessions. For the most part, the webinars will contain the same information. However, each webinar will give a bit more focus to certain sections of the plan. If there is a particular priority area that you are interested in, we recommend and encourage you to attend that webinar. And final slide, please. So thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for your attention today. We will now open the floor and welcome for questions and discussions, comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. I have just opened the chat back up, so folks can ask questions. You can still message them directly to me if you'd prefer, or you can chat them to the entire group, or you can use the raise hand function to ask your question directly. And also a note that if you're on the phone, *6 to unmute and *9 to raise your hand. And it looks like we've gotten one message via chat, so I'll start there. And that was directly to me. Considering that the plan has a number of goals around the theme of education, has IARPC reached out to any K-12 educators and or DOE curriculum developers for comments on the draft plan?
Could you read the last part? Have we reached out to who again, please?
Sorry, has IARPC reached out to any K-12 educators or Department of Education curriculum developers for comments on the draft plan?
So, you know, actually, I think I'm going to toss this to Kaya, because Kaya has been really taking the lead on our STEM education in the recent past, and I bet she can do the best job answering this.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for the question. Since the draft plan has just been released, we haven't reached out specifically to any Department of Education curriculum developers, but we would certainly welcome any input that might come from the Department of Education in terms of how their initiatives link directly to Arctic-specific initiatives. And if that includes K-12, we would also welcome that. And I would just add that there is an Arctic education working group as part of IARPC that is
Oh, sorry, it sounds like Kaya's locked up on us. Kaya, you locked up there just for a second. Can you say the last sentence?
Am I back?
Yep.
Okay.
You are.
Sorry, I sometimes have a free.
That's okay. You were just talking about the collaborations group.
Yes. So the IARPC collaborations team is also interested in Arctic STEM, and if you're interested in that, aside from the plan, you can access that via IARPC.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Paul Berkman. So Paul.
In terms of international and decision makers, a distilled version of the research is in terms of the binding agreements that have emerged through the Arctic Council since 2009. To what extent is the research plan interfacing directly with these, interpreting and using and applying these governance mechanisms that have emerged? I didn't see that as a question or framing in any of the foundational activities.
So we've actually gone to great extent to utilize the information that's come out of the Arctic Council work groups. We just hosted a webinar this morning within the Arctic Science Summit Week to engage the international communities. And so we've done syntheses of the research needs defined by the international communities, which include the Arctic Council work groups. And that information was part of the solicitation from the public input to guide the development of and the definition of the priority areas. We have not so much looked at, I know what you're talking about with respect to the international plans that the international policies that are guiding research in the Arctic or collaborations within other countries. And we're not so much looking at the policy aspects as we are the research questions. And so this is not really a policy related area. However, we will certainly, most certainly, depend and rely and utilize those agreements to execute this research.
So the question wasn't so much of a policy component by itself, but the research itself feeds directly into the decision making. And the interface between the research and the action with the decision making, is itself a fundamental part of the inquiry process that leads to the data that generate the answers to the questions that are researched. So I'm just wondering how that interface itself is being incorporated into the research plan between data and evidence.
Okay, thank you. That's a very excellent question, great observation. So this administration, the Biden administration, is very interested in having science-driven decisions, and it is the policy people from who make up our principles for the IARPC principles, and so our actions are driven by the interest of this administration to fulfill those policy needs, and so that is what is guiding our directions, and also that is the mechanism to ensure that these actions that the information from these efforts do make it back to the policymakers, to the decision makers.
Thanks,
so
Larry.
That's also very well articulated. Thank you.
The next question in the chat is from Adriana. Did you reach out to National Endowment for Humanities and National Endowment for the Arts as possible partners? Arts and humanities are not really represented here, but they are potentially very valuable as part of knowledge co-production and Indigenous community resilience.
We haven't actually directly reached out to those two groups. Those are not members of the IARPC agencies, particularly because they're not actively engaged in research per se. The plan has been distributed widely, and we would welcome guidance about how the scientific activities, research efforts could align with and benefit from and contribute to the humanities and to the arts. But that has not been a priority of the efforts. The IARPC research plan, the primary purpose is to facilitate and advance the research missions of the federal agencies.
And a question from Margaret on what is IARPC's plan to deal with the memorandum on tribal consultation? That's the January 26th presidential memorandum.
So thanks, Margaret. So each of the federal agencies are addressing how they're going to respond to that memorandum, and we will be working with our IARPC member agencies to engage and further advance what their approach is going to be. And actually, Sarah, I might ask you to jump in here for a little bit. Do you want to address this as far as, is there any information we can share on beyond that as far as consultation goes?
No, I think, Larry, each of the agencies in the federal government is required they have 90 days to do their review. That is ongoing, and there are a lot of listening sessions and public webinars about that right now. Those agencies need to complete that review, and we do intend to have a discussion about this at the IARPC staff group level after those reviews are completed.
This is Nakush.
Thanks,
Can
Margaret.
I add something quickly?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Margaret. I think we're also doing the best we can to post on the IARPC Collaborations website when those agency plans are available. So that's one place to sort of track them. I'd also point you to the draft plan itself. In the introduction includes some language around acknowledging the responsibility that IARPC and the federal research community has in order to be inclusive of Indigenous knowledge, and also to respect tribal sovereignty and self-determination. So there's some specific language within the, I think it's the introduction, if I remember correctly, to the draft plan.
Thanks, Takush. And absolutely jump in anytime. Any further comments, questions?
I wanted to, I was kind of, so the 4 new collaboration teams based on the 4 priority areas, is that correct? And I was kind of hoping that there would be a specific team based on co-production knowledge and Indigenous-led research, because I feel like there's a lot of research that needs to be done in that area, as well as a lot of just discussion and communication, kind of on the very broad level, because I know there is like a sub team on the coastal resilience, but in the sense I feel like it deserves its own team and kind of its own airtime, because I think it's a big issue.
So let me just explain briefly why we put it as a foundational activity rather than a priority area. In that, as a foundational activity, we agree it's very important, and we thought it needed to be included or integrated or encompassed in every one of the priority areas we did. And so we didn't establish it as its own priority area. However, I understand what you're getting at as far as, you're right. There is, it doesn't feel like there's a community of practice established around the co-production of knowledge or community or Indigenous-led research at this point. So, that is something that, a good place to put that comment would be in the Federal Register. And so, insert that as a comment, and it'd be helpful also if you could include your thoughts on how that could be developed, how it could be managed, and what role that should play. So, that the implementation has not been defined yet, how we're going to do this. And so, that idea can still be taken forward. Nakush, do you want to add anything, or anybody else?
Yeah, this is Nakush. I was just going to add that we definitely recognize there are some places where IARPC has very strong communities of practice, and those can sort of leverage and quickly sort of start contributing to the different priority areas. The place that you identified in co-production of knowledge and Indigenous-led research is one of those places where we don't have that community of practice. So as we're thinking about implementation, that's what we need. Like, how do we create, that space and that community to be able to contribute, like some of the other areas can contribute to the priority areas. So we're at sort of a different stage. You've identified that we're at sort of different stages with the different priority areas. So we'll be working on that, and your thoughts and comments on how that might look would be welcome.
Hi, could I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Oh, great, thanks. Just as a follow-up, because I'm thinking of submitting a comment, feedback, but you were saying that those agencies, the NEH and the NEA, don't conduct research. Did I understand you right?
NEH, National Endowment for the Arts, is that, or National
for the Humanities?
Well, maybe they do, yeah, but there's a lot I don't know. So maybe they do conduct research, but I'm sorry, I've not been involved in that.
They conduct millions of dollars of funded research. So I just wanted to make sure I understood you right.
Okay,
they do.
I apologize. I'm
That's
sure
okay, but so I just wanted to make sure because they do conduct research, but so there's no scope for including any of that research in this plan. I've read the draft plan, so I'm just curious if there's a point
I
in
won't say,
contributing
yeah.
comments.
Sure, yeah, of course there is, and that might be the comment itself. I guess that's what I would just say is, or what I meant to say previously is that NEH and National Endowment for the Arts, they're not members of IARPC at this point, so they're not actively engaged in Arctic research that I'm aware of. But there's a lot that I don't know. So, but if you see a role, if you see a place where they would be partners, they could contribute. You know, they would certainly be welcome.
Okay.
And so, you know, if you can articulate that and,
Okay.
and help us determine who our partner should be, that would be to everybody's advantage.
Okay, great.
So
Thank you.
Thank you in advance for that.
Thank you.
Larry and Adriana, this is Kaya. I just wanted to make a note, Adriana, that I put in a comment in the chat about those specific comments being received with respect to broadening out STEM education to include arts and humanities. So we made note of that for the foundational activity under education.
Larry, I will also note
But
that
Adriana,
the way the law is written, agencies can be added. And so, for example, priority area 3, I believe it is, has quite a bit of information about infrastructure. And so it's possible that, for example, housing and urban development will need to be brought in as we move into more of an implementation phase of the plan.
thanks. And Adriana, I just want to say again, it is really important that these comments are submitted through the Federal Register process because we have to have it documented. So thanks for that. Other thoughts or suggestions, concerns?
We have a question that came to me, and it is: terrestrial snow cover is not part of the current plan. What is necessary to do to include it as a separate subject in the future plan under development?
But it is. Terrestrial snow cover is a hugely important part of Arctic system interactions. The snow cover plays a almost dominant role in the surface energy balance with respect to how much energy is reflected, how much is absorbed. And so that Arctic system interactions, that Arctic snow cover, even though it's not specifically spelled out, it is hugely important, and it is a component of what needs to be considered. And that terrestrial snow cover, that essentially is one of the processes, the factors, the activities that would be addressed in the implementation plan. And that's where this is a strategic plan. This is a high-level plan. And so what gets done, what gets actually done, it will be described in the implementation plan.
And I'll just clarify, probably under priority area 2 is what Larry was referring to.
Thank you. Caitlin, I see Caitlin Florentine has her hand up.
Yes, thanks, Larry, and thanks all for the opening presentations. I would like a little more information about the biennial implementation plans and sort of the motivation for that, and also what's driving that from sort of a legal perspective. I know that the Arctic Research Plan is mandated by law every 5 years. And so I was wondering if you all could talk a little bit more about, I just recognize that to me, it feels like federal resources for science are very precious and in some cases sparse. And so I think it's really critical that the whole IARPC collaboration team community and also people reviewing the draft have a little more information on what's driving the investment of intellectual time and energy from the federal scientists and others who will be involved in developing those implementation plans, why that additional sort of writing effort is necessary.
Well, you actually answered it yourself in that the Arctic this Arctic Research Plan is very different from the previous plans. The previous, we've had 2 previous Arctic Research Plans have really been in large part focused upon physical and biological processes and resilience analyses. And we developed really strong research communities around those. And those communities of practice are doing really terrific. They've produced some wonderful work, which has really advanced our understanding of Arctic system dynamics in the past decade. And we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose that at all. There is tremendously good work going on around these other priority areas. But those integrated communities, those collaboration teams don't exist at this point. You know, we have some huge problems where there's good people doing work on it, but they're not working with across disciplines. They're not working across agencies. They're not integrating their work with the university or foundation communities. They're not collaborating across international scales. So we can take the work that we've got done, we can build upon it, we can grow, and we can address more of the urgent research needs that are being put forth by the state of Alaska, by the northern communities. So we can do more with the resources that we have. And so there is no new money that is identified for this Arctic research plan. But at the same time, we can be hugely aspirational, and we can do a lot more with the people, with the capabilities, with the platforms, with the resources that we have. And so, you know, when I was a young researcher, I was talking with somebody, I made a very similar comment, and that person told me that, you know, planning is always a good idea. So coming up with better ideas on how to use what we have, it's to everybody's benefit. Now, as far as why we're doing an implementation plan, this plan is very high level and very strategic. And so it just takes, it's a little more, it takes a little more development to actually flesh out exactly how we're going to go forward with this approach. And so it is different than what we've done in the past, but I think it's going to be to everybody's benefit to be a little bit more flexible. So we're going to have a 2-year implementation plan. And from that, we'll get started on what the most urgent needs are and grow and build from that. And then in 2 years, what we can do is we can reassess and we can readapt and focus our energies and our efforts to make sure that we do accomplish those goals. So it's a different approach, but I don't think it's the using people's writing time, I don't think it'll be a waste for anybody. I think it's going to make us stronger in the long run. But I'll welcome other thoughts and other opinions on that.
Can I jump in and just re-articulate one thing that Larry said here? And we heard from loudly from our principals to develop a plan that was more flexible, that allowed for more flexibility. And so it's hard to, when you consider when the current plan, which is currently the 17 to 21 plan, it was written 5 years ago. And trying to project out 5 years, all the performance elements that might need to be covered, it's really hard to do. And so if you set these broader, higher level strategic goals, and then biennially you revisit them, you have the opportunity to respond to changing ecosystem changes, which may have not been predicted previously, or other things that may have arisen. There's just more flexibility to utilize the resources that we have within IARPC through our collaboration teams who will have the ability to come up and say, we're facing this new issue, which we hadn't predicted. Does it fit? Can we work in this space together? So it's our hope that it's going to be more of an iterative process, biennially addressing those more urgent needs that come along that we cannot predict right now.
Liz or Meredith, do we have any more questions in the chat? Or should we call for, is there anybody on the phone who wants to jump in here?
I have not received any other questions in the chat.
I see Olivia Lee has raised her hand. Olivia.
Yeah, hi, Larry. Quick question. I know as part of the foundational activities, there's wording about building capacity for Indigenous communities and for within the federal administration. Is it also include building capacity for the Arctic research community to learn how to better do co-production? Is that something that you feel is already adequately captured, or should that be something that's a comment that's submitted?
You know, we've talked about this several times, and Nikush has a lot better answer than I do. Nikush, why don't you jump in here?
And I may turn to John at some point too for this one. So yeah, we have talked about this a couple of times, and I think it was sort of a dual point of view, thinking about things from capacity sort of on both sides. And I can't pull the exact text right at this moment, but that is my memory. And John, did you have anything to add on this? I think this might be the co-production of knowledge and indigenous-led research.
Yeah, I could say just a few things, and then I think Colleen Strawhacker's on as well in case she wants to add anything. But Olivia, we still feel like we need to have a lot of discussions around the foundational activity of co-production of knowledge and indigenous-led research. I think we also felt like we didn't want to go too far at this point with defining terms and activities, because we do feel like there needs to be co-production for some of that as well. So as Larry mentioned, there's an implementation plan, and I think the hope is to get a lot of good comments through the current comment period, and then have a workshop in early 2022, and we can talk about how best to implement, how best to define words like capacity building, and gaining more information as federal researchers on some of the things that we're trying to do with this foundational activity. And Colleen, did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, thanks, John. And thanks, Olivia, for this question. I think John articulated it nicely that, as Larry mentioned, only feds were allowed to be authors of this plan. And John and I, who are both not Indigenous, helped to craft this section of the plan. And so we felt deeply uncomfortable kind of defining a lot of these terms and making sure that, we provided a place to provide input and to create a community that could talk about these issues that included, if not prioritized, Indigenous voices. And so I think for me, that is what was most important. And I think I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks. Can I add?
Go ahead, Nikush.
Can I add
Absolutely, please.
really quickly? In that amount of time, I was able to pull up my copy of the draft, and I'll point you to the introduction again in the first couple pages that acknowledges both the limitations on the sort of federal and research side, but also the community side, recognizing that there's need sort of on both ends of that spectrum.
Thank you very much. Other comments, concerns?
I have another comment in the chat. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to read that one out too, Liz. So Ming Xiao put a comment there. We do have Jessica Cross online. Maybe Jessica could help answer this one in terms of technology. She mentions the private sector not being mentioned in the current plan, and it would be good to include private sector, particularly in the foundational activities of technology. So I just wondered if you might be able to address that.
Sure. We really, and many others have said this already during our meeting today, we really tried not in the foundational areas section to dictate what the priority areas were going to do. We wanted to sort of provide a thinking framework for them to think about how to implement these foundational areas in their section. We actually had a really hot debate about how extensively public-private partnerships and those kinds of things should be mentioned in the foundational activities section. Folks seem to be on either one side or the other of the issue. If that's helpful at all in answering your question.
Thanks, Jessica. And if there's any other thoughts or ideas on the private sector question, yeah, we'd really invite you to submit those as a comment so that we have those to think about as we look at the next draft.
And I'll just add one more thing, and that is that in our outreach and engagement for the this draft review process, we do have a spreadsheet that is with private sector folks and organizations, companies, and we are reaching out to them, asking them to comment on the draft plan. So maybe some of that will flow back and be incorporated in the future as well.
Thanks, Meredith. This is Nakush, and I'll just quickly add that private sector is mentioned both in the introduction and also in the implementation as sort of key and critical partners to, along with others, to implementing the plan. And also, I'll point you to specifically a priority area 3, sustainable economies and livelihoods, and priority area 4, which is on hazards, which both specifically call out the private sector as potential partners in moving that work forward.
Is there any other comments? Anybody from the telephone want to jump in?
We're at the top of the hour, but there was another question from Sasha, or comment and question. It seems like it would be fitting to include information within the foundational section about how IARPC will be shifting its current organizational structure in order to better meet the needs of today in the Arctic, such as how IARPC will be changing its leadership structure to be more transparent and better incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion into its code of conduct. Are there any plans of including these organizational structure changes in the report?
I don't think the report would be the appropriate place to talk about organizational changes in IARPC. That's the structure of IARPC is not really the core of the report. However, if you have recommendations for changes in leadership in IARPC, certainly send them to well, you could go ahead and submit it through the Federal Register so we do get it documented, or send it to the Secretariat or myself if you have recommendations. So Liz, you said it's top of the hour. Is this a 1 hour meeting or a 2 hour meeting?
Designed to be a 1 hour meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, I had it blocked in. I'm going to keep you guys for. I got it blocked for 2 hours on my calendar. So.
I can also drop a couple. I know some people are saying they've got to run, so I'll just drop the link again for the draft plan download is here. And then if you want to attend the future webinars, you can go to iarpccollaborations.org/webinars.html.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, I planned on keeping you for another hour, but we can let you all go. So, but please do, if you have thoughts, comments, suggestions, please put them in the Federal Register. We really, this document will be made stronger by having community input, and that's the ultimate goal. We want to be of greatest service that we can. So, thanks everybody for your thoughts, your advice, your guidance. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you again at another webinar, another Zoom. Thanks all.